I didn't think anything was off at first. Maybe that's the scary part, how normal it all seemed in the beginning. It just felt like another chapter, a bigger budget, maybe some new faces in the hallway. I never imagined it would unravel everything I'd poured my heart into for nearly a decade. My name is Eleanor Vance, and just a few weeks ago, I was the senior marketing executive at Summit Innovations. That probably sounds very corporate, very official. But Summit, well, for 7 years, it wasn't just a job. Honestly, it felt like home. My second home, anyway. I started there when we were barely more than a handful of dreamers. 15 of us crammed into this old converted warehouse space downtown. The kind of place where the coffee machine was always sputtering, the heating was questionable, and you could literally hear everything. Every phone call, every brainstorm that turned into shouting, every quiet victory celebrated with cheap pizza. It sounds chaotic, and maybe it was, but there was this energy, this feeling that we were onto something huge. Back then, we were just a scrappy little digital marketing agency. We had big ideas, way bigger than our office space or our bank account. The founder, Olivia Hayes, she interviewed me herself. I can still picture it clear as day. She leaned forward across this beat-up IKEA desk that wobbled if you bumped it, looked right into my eyes. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. And she said, "Eleanor, I don't need someone who just wants a job. I need someone who wants to build something extraordinary." And the thing about Olivia, you believed her. You absolutely believed anything was possible when she said it. She had this incredible mix of visionary thinking and down-to-earth, roll-up-your-sleeves practicality. She could charm a Fortune 500 CEO one minute and be helping unpack new computers the next. She just pulled you into her orbit, and you wanted to stay there. My title was supposed to be leading the marketing team, which back then was like 2 other people and me. But in reality, we all did everything. Seriously. One morning I'd be sweating bullets, presenting a complex strategy to a client whose name alone made my palms sweat. And that same afternoon, I'd be down on my knees helping assemble new office chairs because we couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. Those first couple of years, wow, they were intense. 16-hour days weren't uncommon. Working weekends felt normal. I remember taking client calls well past midnight, trying to sound professional while sitting in my pajamas. But we were building something, together. There was this incredible sense of shared purpose. Olivia and I, we developed this kind of shorthand. Across a crowded conference room, just a quick glance, and I knew exactly what she thought of a pitch. Whether it was soaring or sinking fast. She pushed me. She had this mantra, good enough is never good enough. And I pushed myself harder than I ever thought I could. I wanted to meet that standard, not just for the company, but for her. By year 3, Summit had tripled in size. We weren't 15 people anymore. By year 5, we had offices in 3 different cities. Over 100 employees. That old warehouse, a distant memory. We were in sleek downtown offices now, the kind with glass walls and our logo proudly displayed right at the entrance. Industry awards started rolling in. Suddenly, we weren't the scrappy underdog anymore. We were the agency that big brands were lining up to work with, the place where talented people really wanted to be. And I grew right alongside the company. From leading that tiny team, I eventually became the senior executive, overseeing all our client relationships, all our marketing strategy. Olivia and I, we were a team, a powerhouse duo, people called us. She was the big picture visionary, the one dreaming up where we could go next. And I was the one figuring out how to actually get us there, how to make those dreams a reality on the ground. It wasn't just about work, though. Over those 7 years, we became friends. Real friends. The kind who remember each other's birthdays without a calendar reminder, who know exactly how the other takes their coffee without asking. We celebrated promotions and mourned losses together. What we built at Summit, it wasn't just successful in terms of profit margins or client lists. It was special. We'd cultivated this culture where creativity wasn't just allowed, it was expected. Where people felt genuinely valued, like their contributions mattered. Where coming to work, honestly, it felt meaningful. It felt like we were doing something worthwhile together. And then, almost literally overnight, everything changed. I will never, ever forget that morning. Olivia called an all-hands meeting. No warning, no explanation in the calendar invite. Just everyone, main conference room now. The room was packed. People were squeezed in, sitting on the floor along the walls, leaning against the doorframe. There was this nervous energy, whispers, confused looks. Olivia stood at the front. She was wearing this formal navy blazer I'd never seen her in before. Usually she was more casual, approachable. But that morning she looked different, stiff. Her voice was steady when she started speaking, but I knew her. I saw the tiny tremor in her hands as she held the microphone. And then she dropped the bombshell. Summit Innovations had been acquired by Apex Global Corp. This is the next chapter in our growth story, she said, her voice trying for enthusiasm but falling a little flat. She introduced Marcus Thorne, Apex's CEO, who would be taking over Summit, effective immediately. Olivia was staying on, but in a different, less defined role. Marcus stepped forward then. Tall guy, perfectly tailored suit, that kind of smooth, polished confidence that comes from decades spent navigating corporate hierarchies. He started talking about synergies, market dominance, leveraging assets, all this corporate jargon, where Olivia would have talked about creativity, collaboration, client partnerships. He talked about scaling and efficiency. And I felt this knot tighten in my stomach. Something just felt off. Cold. The first month under Marcus Thorne's leadership, well, it seemed okay on the surface. He made a point of scheduling one-on-one meetings with all the department heads, including me. In our meeting, he listened, nodded along as I walked him through our major clients, our unique approach to marketing, the things that made Summit Summit. Impressive work, Eleanor, he said, giving me this brief, assessing look. I can see why Summit has such a strong reputation. I'm looking forward to seeing how we can scale this. Scale, that word again. But the honeymoon, if you could even call it that, didn't last long. Suddenly, new procedures started appearing seemingly out of nowhere. Overnight emails detailing complex new approval chains for everything from social media posts to ordering pens. Mandatory daily reports tracking metrics that felt arbitrary. Productivity tracking software mysteriously installed on everyone's computers. That buzzing creative team, the one that used to thrive on spontaneous hallway brainstorms and late-night bursts of inspiration, now they had to formally book innovation sessions 3 days in advance through an online portal. I tried. I really did. I tried to adapt. I restructured my own team meetings to fit the new reporting requirements, but I fought hard to protect the pockets of time where real, organic creativity could still happen. During the big executive meetings, I'd carefully try to voice my concerns. I'd phrase it diplomatically, Marcus, I absolutely understand the goal of streamlining here, I might say. But one of the key reasons our top clients chose Summit and stay with us is specifically because of our agile, responsive approach. Perhaps we could explore a middle ground that preserves that agility while still meeting Apex's reporting needs. Each time, Marcus would give me this thin, tight smile. Thank you for the input, Eleanor. I'll certainly take that under consideration. But nothing ever changed. It felt like talking to a brick wall. A very polite, well-dressed brick wall. The whole vibe in the office just deflated. People stopped lingering after 5 p.m. to chat or kick around ideas. The snack area, which used to be the heart of the office, always buzzing with conversation and laughter, it sat empty most days. The silence felt heavy. Then came the late-night texts, tentative messages from members of my own team, people I'd mentored, asking if I'd be willing to be a reference for them. My heart sank every time I got one. I brought these concerns to Marcus directly. I told him about the drop in morale, the fear I was sensing, the incredibly talented people who were starting to look elsewhere. His response? It chilled me to the bone. He leaned back in his ridiculously expensive ergonomic chair, steepled his fingers, and said, "Every acquisition has casualties, Eleanor. It's the natural course of business. The ones who truly add value, the ones who are committed to Apex's vision, they will adapt. Casualties." He called dedicated, brilliant people casualties. I walked out of his office that day knowing something fundamental, something precious, had been broken. But even then, even feeling that deep unease, I never, ever imagined how dramatically my own life was about to be shattered. It was a Tuesday morning, just a regular Tuesday. Or so I thought. I'd just gotten to my desk, poured my first cup of coffee, was mentally running through my schedule for the day. Then a calendar invite popped up on my screen. Meeting with Marcus Thorne, 9:15 a.m. Location, office of the CEO. No agenda, no context. Just that. My stomach did this awful lurch. You know that feeling? Instant dread. But I tried to talk myself down. It's probably nothing, I told myself. Maybe he wants to discuss the quarterly marketing strategy again. Maybe he finally wants to talk about that client issue I flagged last week. I remember smoothing down my skirt as I walked towards his office, trying to project confidence. I absolutely did not feel. Mentally rehearsing talking points about our latest campaign metrics, just in case. When I walked into his office, I knew instantly something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Marcus wasn't alone. There was a woman sitting beside his desk, someone I'd never seen before. She had a plain manila folder resting on her lap and this neutral, almost blank expression. She didn't smile, didn't introduce herself. "Eleanor, please sit down," Marcus said. He didn't even look up from his laptop screen. That small gesture, that lack of basic human connection, it spoke volumes. I sat. My hands felt cold. "It'll be direct," he said, finally closing the laptop lid with a soft click. His eyes met mine, and they were completely devoid of warmth. "We're restructuring the marketing department, effective immediately. Your position has been eliminated." The words just hung there in the air. Eliminated. It felt like a physical blow, like the air had been punched out of my lungs. 7 years. 7 years of my life, my energy, my passion, poured into building Summit. And he delivered the news like he was discussing quarterly earnings reports. Without emotion. Without looking me fully in the eye until the very end. "We've determined," he continued, his voice flat, impersonal, "that your management style isn't aligned with Apex's corporate direction." He paused, letting that sink in. "The transition team believes your attachment to Summit's old methodologies is hindering our integration goals." Attachment. Methodologies. He made it sound like my dedication, the very things Olivia and our clients valued, were flaws. Obstacles. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to argue, to defend myself, to ask why, but no sound came out. My throat felt tight, constricted. The woman beside him, the stranger who I later found out was from Apex's HR department, silently slid a document across the polished surface of the desk towards me. "This outlines your separation package, Miss Vance," she said quietly. "You'll be escorted to collect your personal belongings from your office now. Your system access and building access will be terminated by noon today. Everything after that moment is kind of a blur in my memory. Like disconnected fragments of a nightmare. The awkward presence of the security guard hovering silently by my office door as I tried to pack 7 years of my professional life into a single flimsy cardboard box. My plants, photos of my team celebrating milestones, industry awards we'd won together, notebooks filled with ideas. The confused, hurt faces of my team members watching from across the open-plan office floor. They weren't allowed to come over, weren't allowed to say goodbye. I could see the shock and fear in their eyes, the heavy weight of my Summit ID badge as I placed it on the reception desk for the very last time. A piece of plastic, but it felt like shedding a part of my identity. Walking through the parking garage, I remember the sharp click-clack of my heels echoing on the cold concrete. It sounded so loud in the emptiness. I felt hollowed out, completely and utterly hollow. I'd given everything to Summit. Missed family birthdays, postponed vacations year after year. I even ended a serious relationship, partly because my partner couldn't understand my dedication, my long hours, my commitment to the job. And just like that, poof, it was over. Erased, eliminated. The weekend that followed, honestly, it was the lowest point of my entire professional life. Maybe my life, period. I just cycled through this horrible loop of emotions. Numb shock, then white-hot rage, then this crushing, overwhelming sense of failure. What did I do wrong? How could this happen? I didn't leave my apartment for 3 days straight. Just sat there, sometimes crying, sometimes staring blankly at the TV screen, not really seeing anything. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts and calls from former colleagues. Some were expressing absolute outrage on my behalf. Others were sharing grim updates. More terminations had followed mine. Apparently, I was just the first domino to fall in Marcus Thorne's grand restructuring. He was cleaning house, getting rid of anyone tied to the old Summit, to Olivia's way of doing things. By Sunday night, I was curled up on my couch, surrounded by sad-looking takeout containers I hadn't really eaten. I had managed to convince myself that this was it. The end. Everything I had worked so hard for so long. My reputation, my career path, my financial security. It all felt like sand slipping through my fingers. Gone. I felt completely adrift, powerless. I had absolutely no idea that the very next morning, amidst the wreckage, I'd find a lifeline I'd long forgotten existed. Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I forced myself out of bed, made coffee that tasted like ash, and sat down at my kitchen table. It was covered in stacks of papers I'd brought home in that humiliating cardboard box. I wasn't ready to even think about updating my resume yet. It felt too final, too much like accepting this catastrophic defeat. So instead, I started sorting through the files, organizing. It was a small thing, maybe, but it felt like the only act of control I could exert in the chaos my life had suddenly become. And that's when I found it, tucked away at the bottom of a stack of old performance reviews and project plans, a handsome leather portfolio. Olivia had given it to me after my first year at Summit, when we'd landed our very first major client, against all odds. Inside, carefully preserved, was my original employment contract. And clipped neatly behind it were all the subsequent amendments, the promotion letters, the salary adjustments over the years. I started flipping through the pages mechanically at first, just letting the memories wash over me. The day Olivia promoted me to director, her proud smile, the intense negotiation for my senior executive role a few years later, how we'd hammered out the details over pizza late one night in the office. My finger traced over Olivia's signature on one of the amendments, bold, confident, flowing, just like her personality. And then I saw it. Clause 19C. Tucked away in the dense fine print of my very last contract renewal, the one from my promotion to senior executive. Honestly, I'd almost completely forgotten about it. Suddenly, another memory surfaced, sharp and clear. About 3 years ago, maybe a little more. Rumors of potential acquisitions had started swirling, just whispers at first. Olivia had called me into her office late one evening, after almost everyone else had gone home. She poured us both a generous measure of whiskey, something reserved for very special occasions or very serious conversations. Eleanor, Shed said, her usual upbeat energy tempered with a rare seriousness. I need to be honest with you. I am considering offers. Nothing's decided yet, not even close. But if something does happen, I want to make sure the people who built this place with me, the people who poured their blood, sweat, and tears into Summit, I want to make sure you're protected. She slid a contract amendment across her big oak desk. It was the senior executive contract. Look at this, she pointed to a specific section. Clause 19C. Read it carefully. She explained what it meant. If new management came in as part of an acquisition, and if they terminated my employment without cause within the first 5 years after the acquisition, then I was entitled to a severance package that wasn't just standard. It was specifically designed to reflect my contributions to the company's growth. It included a significant percentage based on the increase in the company's valuation during my tenure. At the time, it had felt abstract, like a hypothetical safety net for a disaster that would probably never happen. Summit felt invincible back then. I remember signing it, feeling grateful for Olivia's loyalty, for her foresight, but honestly, never really imagining we'd ever need to invoke it. Now, sitting at my kitchen table 3 years later, jobless and reeling, my hands started to tremble as I reread Clause 19C again and again. The language was precise, legalistic, but the implications, oh wow. The implications were staggering. Given Summit's explosive growth during my 7 years there, growth that I knew, objectively, I had played a significant role in driving, this wasn't just a decent severance package. This was potentially life-altering money. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling slightly as I dialed Chloe Bennett. Chloe's a sharp lawyer, but also a good friend I'd known since college. Chloe? My voice sounded shaky, breathless. Can you come over? Like, right now? I think I found something. She must have heard the urgency, the desperation mixed with something else, maybe a sliver of hope, because she arrived less than an hour later, briefcase in hand, looking concerned. I wordlessly handed her the leather portfolio, open to Clause 19C. I watched her face intently as she read it. Her expression shifted from professional concentration to surprise, then to wide-eyed astonishment. Her usual lawyerly composure visibly slipped as she got to the part detailing the compensation formula. She looked up at me, her eyes huge. "Eleanor," she breathed. This is extraordinary. Olivia must have really valued your contribution." "Wow!" She tapped the document with her pen. "And look at how this is worded. Without cause. They can try, but they absolutely cannot wiggle out of this by claiming the restructuring exemption nonsense Marcus fed you. A corporate legal team might try to fight it, try to intimidate you, but honestly, they'd lose. This thing," she tapped the page again decisively, "this is ironclad." For the first time since that horrible, humiliating Tuesday morning, I felt something other than despair and anger. It wasn't quite hope yet, not fully, but it was close. It was the flicker of possibility, the first crack of light in the darkness. So I asked, my voice steadier now, "What do we do?" Chloe closed the contract deliberately. The amazement in her expression hardened into a look of fierce determination. "What do we do?" she echoed, a small, sharp smile playing on her lips. "We remind Mr. Marcus Thorne and Apex Global Corp exactly who they decided to underestimate." Chloe and I spent the entire rest of that day huddled around my dining room table. It completely disappeared under a sea of legal pads, printouts of Summit's financial reports showing year-over-year growth, company valuation estimates, and half-empty coffee mugs. We went over Clause 19C with a fine-tooth comb, dissecting every single word, every comma. We calculated, double-checked, and triple-checked the exact figure I was entitled to, based meticulously on Summit's valuation increase during my 7-year tenure. It was a number significantly larger than I had even dared to imagine. "Okay, here's the strategy," Chloe explained, typing furiously on her laptop, her focus absolute. "We need to be precise. Unemotional. Clinical. Corporate executives like Marcus Thorne, they respond to facts, figures, and the credible threat of expensive litigation, not appeals to fairness or sentimentality." She paused, looking up at me, her gaze serious but encouraging. "This letter we're drafting? It needs to be a perfect blend of cold, hard legal jargon and crystal-clear consequences if they don't comply. No wiggle room." Together, we crafted a formal letter. It was, I have to say, a masterpiece of controlled restraint, yet it carried an unmistakable undercurrent of power. It started simply, acknowledging my termination on the specified date. Then, it directly referenced Clause 19C of my employment agreement, quoting the relevant sections verbatim. Following that was a detailed line-by-line calculation showing exactly how we arrived at the substantial compensation figure due to me, a figure that was nearly 3 times the paltry, generous severance package Marcus's HR drone had slid across the desk. The final paragraph was polite but firm, outlining the specific time frame within which we expected payment and clearly stating the legal steps we were fully prepared to take if the terms of the contract were not honored promptly. Is this too aggressive?" I asked, reading the draft over for what felt like the 10th time. My stomach was doing flips. This felt bold, almost confrontational, which wasn't really my style. Chloe shook her head firmly. "This isn't aggressive, Eleanor. This is professional self-advocacy. You didn't ask for this situation, but Olivia had the foresight to put this protection in place for you. You earned this protection through 7 years of hard work and proven results. Now we are simply ensuring the contract is honored." The next morning, feeling a strange mix of terrified and empowered, we sent the letter. Certified mail, return receipt requested, addressed directly to Marcus Thorne at Apex Global Corp headquarters. We also sent copies simultaneously to Apex's chief legal counsel and crucially to the chairperson of the Apex board of directors. And then came the hardest part, the waiting. Every time my phone buzzed or rang, my heart leaped into my throat. I rehearsed over and over again what I would say if Marcus himself called, furious, or if some high-powered corporate lawyer called, trying to lowball me, trying to intimidate me into backing down or accepting a fraction of what the contract stipulated. But silence. 1 day passed. Then 2. Then 3. Nothing. Not a peep. I started to worry. Were they just going to ignore it? Pretend they never received it? Bury it under a mountain of corporate bureaucracy? Was this whole Clause 19C thing just a pipe dream after all? Just as doubt was starting to seriously creep back in, late on the third afternoon, my phone lit up. An unfamiliar number, a New York area code. My breath caught. I glanced at Chloe, who happened to be over again, reviewing some other documents. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Eleanor Vance speaking. Ms. Vance, a calm professional male voice responded. This is Daniel Sterling. I'm calling from the board of directors at Apex Global Corp. My eyes widened. I mouthed board member silently, frantically to Chloe across the room. My heart was absolutely racing. Ms. Vance, Mr. Sterling continued, his tone revealing nothing. No anger, no defensiveness, just business. I have received and reviewed your letter regarding Clause 19C of your employment agreement. A pause. I would like to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible to discuss this matter in person. Would tomorrow morning, say, 10 o'clock, at the Westside Hotel downtown work for you? Somehow, I managed to maintain my composure, agreed to the time and place, asked a couple of clarifying questions. Chloe was frantically scribbling on a notepad and holding up for me. After I hung up the phone, Chloe and I just stared at each other for a long moment, stunned into silence. A board member, Chloe finally whispered, breaking the quiet. Not their legal counsel calling to posture, not HR trying to manage it. A board member. Eleanor. They are taking this very, very seriously. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced, playing out every possible scenario for the meeting. Would they try to fight it, offer a settlement somewhere in the middle? Would Marcus Thorne be there sneering? By the time morning arrived, I was exhausted, but also strangely calm. As I put on my sharpest suit, the one I always save for crucial presentations, I felt a shift inside me. For the first time since I'd been so abruptly dismissed, I wasn't walking into a situation feeling powerless. I was walking into that meeting with leverage. Real leverage. That forgotten clause, nestled in the fine print of a contract Marcus Thorne had likely never even bothered to read thoroughly before firing me, was about to completely change the power dynamic. Riding the elevator up to the hotel's exclusive executive conference level, looking out at the city skyline, I had this sudden, clear realization. This wasn't just about the money anymore, although the money was significant and rightfully mine. It wasn't even just about personal vindication against Marcus Thorne, though that felt pretty damn good too. This was about standing up for something bigger. It was about standing up for the value of loyalty, for the importance of building something meaningful, for everything Olivia and I, and our whole team, had poured our souls into creating at Summit. It was about defending the idea that culture and people matter. And in that moment, heading towards that meeting, whatever the outcome, I felt like I had already won something important back. The conference room at the Westside Hotel felt like a different universe from the vibrant, sometimes messy, creative spaces at Summit. All gleaming mahogany, cold leather chairs arranged precisely around a massive table, stark modern art on the walls. It was designed for power plays and bottom lines, not collaboration or connection. Daniel Sterling, the board member who had called me, was already there when I arrived. He wasn't alone. He stood to greet me, flanked by two other people he introduced as Apex Global's chief legal counsel and their chief financial officer. 3 suits against my one, but notably absent. Marcus Thorne. Interesting. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Miss Vance, Daniel Sterling began. His tone was professional, courteous, not unfriendly, but definitely all business. He gestured for me to sit. As I mentioned on the phone, I have personally reviewed your employment contract thoroughly, specifically Clause 19C. I simply nodded, kept my expression neutral, and remained silent. I remembered Chloe's final piece of coaching just before I left my apartment. Let them speak first. Let them lay their cards on the table. Don't interrupt. Just listen. Frankly, Miss Vance, Sterling continued, leaning forward slightly, his gaze direct, I am troubled by several aspects of this situation. My eyebrows went up slightly. Troubled? That was unexpected. Firstly, he went on, this specific clause, 19C, should absolutely have been flagged and addressed during our due diligence process before the acquisition was finalized. That was an oversight on our part. He paused. More concerning, however, is the manner in which your termination was handled, particularly given your long and clearly valuable history with Summit Innovations. The CFO, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit, slid a sleek folder across the polished table towards me. Ms. Vance, we have prepared a revised separation agreement for your review. My hand was steady as I reached for it, opened it slowly. I scanned the document, maintaining my outward composure, trying not to let my relief show. There it was, the figure. Not a penny less than what Chloe and I had calculated based on Clause 19C. They weren't trying to negotiate, they were honoring it. In full. There's something else, Daniel Sterling added, capturing my attention again. Mr. Thorne's position at Apex Global Corp is currently being reevaluated. He chose his words carefully. His overall handling of the Summit Innovations integration, including personnel decisions, has raised significant concerns among several members of the board. Oh, wow. So the fallout wasn't just affecting me. My situation, my stand, it might actually be contributing to consequences for Marcus himself. The chief legal counsel cleared her throat then, speaking for the first time. Vance, in light of this, and acknowledging the disruption, we would like to offer an additional proposal. She slid another, thinner document towards me. Several key Summit clients have been quite vocal, expressing concerns since your departure. We are prepared to offer you a temporary consulting contract to help smooth the transition and ensure continuity on those major accounts. It would be for 6 months, with generous compensation. She paused, adding pointedly, and you would report directly to Mr. Sterling and the Board Oversight Committee. Not, she emphasized slightly, to Mr. Thorne. This was completely unexpected. Not just the full financial settlement, but an offer to come back? In a role that bypassed Marcus entirely? Whatever you decide about the consulting offer, he said, meeting my eyes, I genuinely hope we can find a way forward that preserves the best of what made Summit Innovations so special. Walking out of that sterile hotel conference room and back into the bustle of the city streets, I felt this enormous weight lift off my shoulders. A weight I hadn't even fully realized I'd been carrying since that awful Tuesday morning. This wasn't just about the money, though the financial security was undeniably huge. It wasn't just about professional vindication, though seeing Marcus Thorne's authority undermined felt like a form of justice. It was deeper than that. It was about the quiet confirmation that what Olivia and I and our whole team had built together, it had real, tangible, lasting value. That the relationships, the trust, the creative culture, they weren't just soft, feel-good concepts. They were essential business assets. Assets that Apex, under Marcus' leadership, had foolishly undervalued and nearly destroyed. I called Chloe from the hotel lobby, my voice steady now, but filled with a new kind of certainty, a quiet strength. Chloe, you're not going to believe this. They agreed. To everything. Clause 19C, honored in full, I paused, taking another deep breath, and they offered me a consulting contract. Wow, Chloe breathed on the other end. Then, ever the practical lawyer, she said immediately, okay, definitely take the money. That's non-negotiable. The contract? Think carefully about that one, Eleanor. Really think about what you want next. And that's exactly what I did. The settlement changed everything, of course. It gave me breathing room, security, options I hadn't had before. But more than the money, it changed how I saw myself, how I viewed my entire professional journey. It was validation, etched in black and white, and backed by a significant bank transfer. After a lot of soul-searching, I declined the consulting offer from Apex. As tempting as it was in some ways, the compensation was indeed generous, and the idea of reporting directly to the board held a certain appeal. I knew, deep down, I needed a clean break. I needed to step away completely from the shadow of Apex and Summit, at least for a while, to figure out my own path forward, on my own terms. So what did I do? I took a portion of that settlement, a calculated risk, but one that felt right. And I used it to launch my own small boutique marketing agency. I called it Vance Creative Strategy. No glass offices, no huge overhead. Just me, my laptop, and a whole lot of determination, working initially from my dining room table, the same table where Chloe and I had strategized just weeks before. And something amazing happened. Within just a few weeks of quietly putting the word out, 3 of Summit's major former clients I had personally managed and built strong relationships with over the years, reached out to me. They'd heard I'd left, weren't happy with the changes under Apex, and were eager, they said, to work directly with me again. Building something entirely new from the ground up, all on my own. Honestly, It's been both terrifying and incredibly exhilarating. I made a conscious decision to keep my new agency small, selective. I focused on bringing in only clients whose values aligned with mine, projects that felt meaningful. And I prioritized, above all else, recreating that collaborative, supportive, creative culture that had made the early days at Summit so special. Slowly, carefully, I started building a small team. And guess who started joining me? First, Sarah, one of my most talented former senior managers from Summit. Then Leo, our brilliant lead designer, who had also felt stifled under the new Apex regime. Soon, we had this tight-knit, incredibly talented group, mostly Summit alumni who had also chosen to leave Apex, working together again. It felt right, like coming home, but to a home we were building ourselves, brick by brick. Perhaps the most surprising and maybe the most healing moment came about 6 months after everything had gone down. I got an email out of the blue from Olivia Hayes. We met for coffee. She told me she'd left Apex entirely a few months after I did. She just couldn't stomach watching the company poured her life into become something unrecognizable, she said. Something purely focused on short-term profits over people and long-term vision. And then, stirring her cappuccino, she casually mentioned something else. Marcus Thorne. He had been quietly removed as CEO of the Summit division within Apex. Apparently, the continued exodus of senior talent, combined with the loss of several key, high-profile clients, including the ones who had come over to Vance Creative, had been too damaging for the Apex board to ignore any longer. Daniel Sterling had kept his word, it seemed. Consequences had finally caught up with Marcus Thorne. Looking back now, it's strange. That whole ordeal, the shock, the betrayal, the fight, it was one of the hardest things I've ever been through. But coming out the other side, I feel stronger, more clear about what truly matters to me, both professionally and personally. Justice doesn't always look like a big, dramatic courtroom scene. Sometimes it's quieter. Sometimes it's found in reclaiming your own value, in building something new from the ashes, in proving that integrity and treating people right. Well, that's actually the smartest business strategy of all. It turns out that forgotten clause didn't just give me a financial safety net. It gave me back my power, my voice, and ultimately, the freedom to define success on my own terms. And that's a redemption story I'm proud to own. Thanks for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but maybe someone out there needed to hear it. What are your thoughts on quiet revenge or finding strength after a setback? I'd love to read your perspective in the comments below. If stories like this resonate with you, please consider subscribing to the channel, TK Revenge Story. And if you feel moved to support our mission of sharing these real-life experiences, you can use the Super Thanks feature. Sometimes, healing can come from giving too. Take care.